Hello and welcome to Artists for Everyone. And this week, in this episode, we are going to paint a bluebird on a flowering branch because I saw the first bluebird of the season the other day and I want to celebrate that. So I'm going to start with talking about our tools and materials. I have a glass of water and some tissue to wipe my brush. I have my beautiful Artists for Everyone palette by Wildthorne, and as always I will recommend other paints that you can use to substitute for these colors. If you don't have them and you have other watercolors, that is fine. I have a 000 Sennelier squirrel mop, and any smallish pointed round will do. I would say something like a size 6 or size 4. Size 6 would be ideal, even an 8 would be okay. And then I have a number 2 pencil and an eraser. This is just an old stick eraser that I have because it's handy. Any eraser would be fine. And then I have my little hake brush that I use to dust off eraser dust from my paper. And then a small piece of watercolor paper, 4x6, such as Strathmore watercolor postcards. So that is all we need. And I am going to move these things aside so I can start with my drawing. And as always, we're going to start with simple shapes, and I'm going to position my paper portrait wise, so it's the long way. So my bird can be about here, and then I can have some branches coming off. So the first thing we're going to do is draw the body of the bird, and I'm going to turn my paper, and I'm going to draw this a little bit darker than I normally would, so you can see it very well, and then I will use an eraser on it to lighten it up before I begin painting. So I'm going to start with an oval, and that is my bird's head. Okay, so just an oval on its side, and then I'm going to draw an oval that extends from the body, and I want it to be about even on this side and a little bit wider on the left side. So I've got a small oval for the head and a larger oval for the body. And then right here where the body connects to the head, I'm just going to draw a little sliver moon down, and that sort of represents a side wing. Okay, so just a little piece that kind of comes off the side like that. And then I'm going to connect his head to his body by starting at the end of the oval and just drawing a little curved line so the two connect. And then the same on this side, so back of his head, and it kind of comes down like that. All right? So let's erase our extra lines right now so they don't confuse us. So I'm going to erase everything inside as well as I can. I don't need to erase this line here, but just where the oval, the smaller oval met the larger oval. Okay, so now we have a basic bird body shape. So next I'm going to draw his eye and his beak, and there's something called a gesture line in a bird. I wish I had actually a photograph of another bird here, but I don't. But any bird you look at, let's say his beak was, he was looking up in the sky. So the gesture line would be what ran through the center of his beak and right under his eye. Okay, so the gesture line would be something like that if he were looking up. Okay, but I want my bird to be looking just sort of straight out to the side. And so I'm going to draw my gesture line starting in about the center of the head, the oval, and draw it straight out to extend just a little bit, about 1/4 inch from the head. Okay? And then to make the beak, again, we're not going for ultra realism here. We're going for the suggestion of a bluebird, okay? The expressiveness of a bluebird. And bluebirds' beaks are sort of narrow and not terribly long. So I'm just going to start here, and I'm going to draw a little line there. And then I'm going to start a little bit inside the head and let this bottom line come up to meet it. Okay, so it's just a little beak shape. I'm going to lift this up a little bit so you can see it better, hopefully. Okay? And then for his eye, I'm going to go just, so the line starts halfway, so I'm going right at the end of that line and right above the line. And I'm going to draw a little circle. Okay? And then on the sides of the circle, I'm going to draw just sort of little dots where it comes out. And then within the circle, I'm going to draw another circle up toward the top. So let me lift this up for you to see. Okay? All right. So now I have his beak and his eye, and I can erase the line here. I can erase that gesture line. Except I'm going to leave a little bit of it coming into the head. If any of your line extends beyond the beak, then just erase that too. So if it came out farther, then you can just erase that. All right, so now I have the basic body of the bird, and I'm going to draw a branch. And I'm going to draw it just sort of coming off his body like this, and then down the page. All right, and I'm going to go here, and I'm going to draw another line right above it. So that's the main branch. At the end of my main branch, I'm just going to take it out and make a little sort of V. So it's sort of like it broke off. And then coming from the end of the main branch, I'm going to draw another branch that kind of swoops up and breaks off into two pieces, just like that. And then over here, on this side of the branch, on the right side, I'm going to draw a piece that goes up this way. So again, I'll just take my pencil and draw one line up. It doesn't have to be super neat. You'll see why later. And then another one. Okay. And then down here, I want to put one more. So maybe about halfway down, and I'll just arc it out. One. And then two. All right, just real simple. Okay? All right. So now that we have the branches in place, we're going to draw a tail sticking out from his body, and I'm just going to make right here a little tail shape and just draw a little line kind of through the, not quite the center, but just off center. Again, this is very suggestive. We're not going for realism, we're going for fun and enjoyment, and we'll have a sweet little bluebird when we're finished. So I'm not going to worry about drawing his feet, but I am going to worry about these lines here that are inside the branch, because the branch is in front of his body. So any lines that are left from the oval of the bird's body, we want to erase those. Okay, and then I can erase this little line here. All right, so that is our basic drawing. Very, very simple. And the first step that we're going to do is we're going to paint some ecru color on his body, okay, and then put a little bit of cyan brulee on the side of his body. So I'm going to, let's see here, I thought I had a palette, but I don't. See, I'm forgetting things already. So I'm going to turn this around, and I'll use this for my palette. Okay. And I'll just put my paints right here. Hopefully you can see that. And just move some of these things, my little treasures. Okay, so now I'm going to wet my brush, and I'm going to pick up some of the buff Titan. if you don't have buff Teton, what I would use is a little bit of a white watercolor, if you have some, with just a touch of yellow ochre in it or a touch of burnt sienna in it. Or you can use a buff titanium. All right, you could also take a little bit of yellow ochre or a little bit of burnt sienna and just make it really, really pale, and then add just a touch of blue to it to gray it out a little bit. All right, so I have my buff Teton on my palette, and I want a fairly light mix. And then I'm going to paint water on my bird from the beak all the way down, but I'm going to avoid that little section of wing, the sliver moon there. So I'm painting water all the way down his body, all the way to the branch, and I'm stopping at the branch. So this water glaze is going to allow our paint to sort of smooth over this whole area in a very soft way. Okay, so there's my water glaze. And then I'm going to pick up the buff Teton and I'm going to drop it under his beak. Okay. A little bit down this side. And then I'm going to pick up some more and I'm going to drop it down here above the branch. Okay, so a little bit from his beak, so a little like kind of a triangle there, and then a little bit above the branch, and then I'm just going to take the straight buff Teton and I'm going to paint the lower part of his body that sticks out under the branch. And that is all. Okay, that's all I'm going to do with that. So while that is still wet, I'm going to grab some Cien Brulee, just right on my brush. If you don't have Cien Brulee, what you're going to want to use is burnt sienna. And then I'm going to start under his beak, and I'm going to drop in the Cien Brulee along the side of his body all the way down to the branch. I'm just dropping it in all the way down to the branch. So we want to keep it on the right side of the bird. Okay? And then I'm going to rinse my brush and dry it off. I'll turn my paper and I'm going to run this dry tip of my brush along the edge to sort of suck that paint over to the edge. All right, it gives me a nice clean edge that way. And I can use my eraser later to get rid of the pencil marks. And then I'm going to dry my brush off again, and I'm going to lightly feather the edges of that paint. So see how I'm just taking my brush and lightly pulling it through very, very lightly, just so it's nice and soft. Okay? So that is the first step. That's all we can do until this dries. So I'm going to turn off the camera, let it dry, and then I'll be back. Okay, so now our first layer is dry, and we're going to continue on, and we're going to paint the branch. The branch is next. So the branch is pretty simple. For the most part, we're going to be using raw umber. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to paint the main branch. So the first one we drew, the one that's a little bigger than the rest. And we're going to put a water glaze down on it. So just very carefully pull clean water all along this main branch. Don't have to worry about the little pieces that are going off to the side, but clean water all along the main branch. And then I'm going to pick up burnt umber straight from the, raw umber straight from the pan. And I'm going to drop that along the bottom of my branch. Very carefully just sort of pull it along and let it just sort of flow up toward the top. And it probably won't reach the top, and that's fine. Okay, I always turn my paper if I need to. And just pull it all the way down that bottom side, or as you come down here, it'll be the left side. Okay? Now, I'm going to continue to turn my paper because I want to paint these other branches. And I'm just going to use the straight raw umber with the tip of my brush. So I'm holding my brush really down toward the bottom. And then as it branches off into other branches, I'll just let it get narrower and narrower toward the end. Okay, we're not looking for perfect, all right? We're just looking for branches. So now I'll do this one. Okay, and then the last one I'll do is the one on the bottom. So you can see. Sorry about the shadows. It's a really sunny day and my cat, Ralphie, keeps jumping up here. Hi, Ralphie. I'm just pulling that tip of my brush out to the end of those branches. All right, and that's all we're going to do for the branch right now. We'll put another layer of another color on in a little bit. So now that that's done, I want to go ahead and do the beak and the eye. So basically, I forgot to tell you one of my supplies, and that is I want to use a Pigma Micron or some kind of archival ink pen that's permanent, black ink, with a very fine tip. So even a very finely tipped Sharpie would be fine. And I'm going to use this because the eye is so tiny that it's a little bit fiddly for some of us to use our brush in that small of an area. And this just makes it a lot easier. Ralphie just tried to steal my eraser. So I wonder if I turn this light off if it's any better. No, not really. I just noticed a lot of shadows. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, so I'm going to turn my paper around so I don't rub my hand on the wet paint. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to outline that eye with the black ink. And I'm just going to take my time and put a nice outline all around the eye. Okay? And then I'm going to outline that little circle within the circle. And it's going to get a little smaller. I want just a tiny little white circle inside. And then I'm going to fill in where the pupil would be, leaving just a tiny sliver of white. Okay? So let me see if I can hold this up for you. Hopefully you can see that. All right, so that's all we're going to do for the eye. In fact, I'm going to make the little tiny circle a little bit smaller, and it's so much easier to do this with a fine pen than a brush. Okay, so now his eye is done, and we're going to paint his beak. And I want his beak to be a dark gray. And because I don't have a dark gray in my palette, I can easily mix one. So I'm going to use the Cobalt Blue Premier, put a little bit of that on my palette, and then a little bit of the raw umber, and mix them together until I get a dark gray. And I'm pretty happy with that. If you need to warm it up a little bit, you can always add a little bit of Cien Brulee or burnt sienna. So these colors are colors that would be in most watercolor palettes. So that's a decent kind of dark blue-gray. All right, I can make a black, I could make any colors, but because my bird is more blue, I think that using a blue to create the gray is a really good idea. So there I have a dark gray, Now, so basically in a regular watercolor palette, you would have a cobalt blue or perhaps a French ultramarine, and then a raw umber or a burnt sienna. Okay, any of those combinations with blue would give you a gray. So to paint the beak, I'm going to have the paint on my brush. I'm going to use the tip of my brush. I'm going to dry it off a little bit so I don't have too much paint. And I'm going to use the very tip of my brush to draw in the dark upper beak, just very carefully. And then I'm going to fill in the lower beak, and I'm going to try to leave the littlest sliver of light in between the two. Very, very, very small. Okay, so there is my beak. I painted the upper half and then the lower half, trying to leave a little bitty sliver of white in between. If you mess that up, it's okay. It's not going to matter in the long run. It really won't. But if you can try to leave a little sliver, that's really nice. All right, so our eye and our beak are now done. And now we're going to move on to the little wing bar over here and the tail. And how I'm going to do that, clean my brush well. So for the tail, I'm going to start with a cobalt blue primaire and get a nice juicy puddle of it on my palette so it's not full strength. I want some water mixed into it, okay? And I'm going to very carefully paint the tail in those two sections. So I'll paint the forward section first. Okay, and then I'm going to paint the back section, and when I paint it, once again, I'm going to try to leave the smallest little sliver of white, especially toward the bottom. And all that does, we can fill it in at the top, but toward the bottom, we want that little sliver of white showing. And what that does is it helps us have some separation between the two tail feathers, okay? And of course, bluebirds have many tail feathers, but we're going to paint two. And then we're going to take some more cobalt blue primaire straight from the pan, and we're going to paint his little wing bar over here. So I'm again going to be very careful with the tip of my brush and just pull that stronger blue down. Okay, I'm going to clean my brush and dry it off, roll it to a point, and I'm going to use the tip of my brush to go along the outer edge, making sure that my outer edge is as smooth as possible, and then it just meets the branch. And that's all for that little outer wing bar. Now, while the tail is still wet, I'm going to pick up more of the cobalt blue primaire full strength, and I'm just going to drop it in where the body meets the tail. And also on this side. And I'm going to run that darker blue all the way down to the bottom and a little bit over here on this side. Okay, clean my brush, dry it off, and then use the tip of my brush to sort of feather and let those two strengths of blue sort of mix together, just to give it a little bit more variation. All right, so now his tail and his wing bar are finished. And we're going to go to the head. So I think, you know what, actually, I'm not quite sure that this beak is dry and that the eye is completely dry yet. And I have made that mistake in the past. You think it would be dry, but it isn't always dry. So we're going to go ahead and put the second color on our tree branch. So I'm just going to pick up the ochre léger, which would be yellow ochre. Put it on my palette so it's not full strength, so I mix it with a little bit of water in my brush. And then I'm going to paint right on top of that raw umber, so starting at the tip of the branch, and paint right on top of the raw umber and carry it all the way down the branch. We don't have to worry about the auxiliary branches that come off this main branch. We just want to paint on top of the raw umber all the way down our main branch. And that just sort of fills in the rest of the branch. Okay, there you go. So the next step is the head. I am going to clean my brush and grab some more of the Cobalt Blue Premier or Cobalt Blue, mix it with some water so it's a little bit lighter in value. And then I'm going to turn my paper and I'm going to start putting a water glaze on the bird's head. I'm going to take it all the way up to the beak, a little bit to where the buff Teton was, all the way up to the eye. I have a little bit of blue in my water, and that's fine because it actually helps me see. And I'll take it all the way down to where it meets that side wing that we painted blue. I'm painting the whole head with this water glaze. If there's too much water, I want to dry my brush off and just wick around it one more time. I'll do it one more time because I see I have a little pooling here, and that happens. Okay, I'm happy with that. So his entire head, down to the buff Teton, to the beak, and down to the wing bar there, has a water glaze. I'm going to pick up this lighter glaze of Cobalt Blue, and I'm going to start dropping it in, leaving some white space around the eye. Okay, so that paint will sort of feather into the white space, but it won't entirely cover it. And then all over the rest of his head, I'm just dropping it in. Okay, and then I'm going to take straight Cobalt Blue from the pan, turn my paper, and I'm going to start dropping it behind the beak, all along the top of his head. So see how I'm just touching my paintbrush to the paint that's already wet on the head. Just touching it. I'm not painting it, but I'm just letting that paint fall off the brush. I'm taking it all the way down here. All right, then I'm going to take it up behind the beak and a little bit down here. So I've got kind of this darker rim. Just go over it, especially on the top. We want the top to be a little darker, and then right here and right back here. All right. So now we'll clean our brush and dry it off, roll it to a point, and we're going to do the same thing we always do. We're going to take the tip of our brush and run it around the outer edge to wick that paint to the edge to give us a clean line. And the main reason we do this is so we don't get hard water lines or hard paint lines on the edges. And then where his little head meets the buff Teton, clean my brush, roll it off, and with the very tip of my brush, I'm just going to flick through the blue into the buff Teton, just to make it sort of feathery there. Just so it's not one hard line. Okay, just a little bit. And now his head is finished. All right, the last step is we're going to paint little feet. Before we do the flowers, I should say, is we're going to paint his little feet. And I'm going to use the same gray that I mixed for his beak, wake it up a little bit with my brush, kind of dab my brush so it's not too wet. I might make it a little bit darker actually, with a little bit more blue, a little bit more raw umber. And all I'm going to do, so his feet are coming out from about here on his body, so I'm just going to draw a little line to the branch, and then I'm going to take the line over the branch, and then I'm going to put a line on either side, so it's like this little triangle. Okay? And then his other foot would be up here, but it might just be a little bit of a mark there, and then 3 lines for his toes. Just really simple. That's it. Now, where his where his leg comes out of his feathers, you would have a little bit of a shadow there. So if I just take a clean, damp brush and just lightly touch where his leg comes out, it'll start to look like a shadow. And I can bring that down a little bit. Okay? Just a little bit of a suggestion. If it's too much, you can take your brush and just sort of soften it. Go right onto that branch, it's not going to matter. And while that little bit of gray is on your brush, just go right under the branch. You can even pick up some of his feet and add a little bit of a shadow where his branch is over his body. All right, so now our bird is finished, okay? And I'm going to let this dry completely. And while it's drying, I'm going to take a piece of regular copy paper, and I'm going to cut a little oval out of the copy paper the same size as my bird. Okay, so why don't you do that after you're done with these steps, and then we'll be back to finish the flowers. Okay, so my painting is now dry, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little piece of paper that I cut out and put it right over my bird, okay, just to sort of protect him for this next step. We're going to take our paintbrush, get lots of water in it, and we're going to grab some of the wood rose. And if you don't have wood rose, any kind of pinky red or peachy red would be fine. We're just looking for something the color of flowers, so you could even use yellow or purple, doesn't matter. I really love the wood rose. So I'm going to put some of that on my palette, and then I'm going to hover it over my paper, and I'm going to hit my brush. Okay, so my brush is full of paint. I'm going to hit my brush, and I'm going to try to control a little bit, but we want it to spatter. We want it to look like little frothy flowers. So I'm spattering at the ends of my branches. So these little tiny spatters. And once that's done, I'll take a little more wood rose, mix it in, and I'm going to put some bigger dots by just touching my brush. So I have some larger spots and some smaller spots. And I especially want to concentrate the larger spots where my branch ends. Okay, a little bit more. All right, then I'm going to grab a little bit of the gold mica, so any kind of iridescent gold or even a very clear golden yellow, and I'm also going to spatter some of that around the tree branches. Just a little bit. Okay, next I'm going to take the mimosa, or any kind of pale cool yellow, straight from the pan, and I'm just going to put a couple dots here and there of just the clear yellow. You can touch the other paint, but it's kind of nice too if it's just on its own here and there. Okay? All right, and now I don't really want to wait for this to dry because I want my green of the leaves to sort of mix with the flower color. So I can take this off of my bird now. He's safe. And I'm going to take some of the Viridian. You could also use sap green, or you could mix a green with like ultramarine blue and a light yellow. So I'm going to take some of this green, and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of mimosa to make it a brighter spring green. And then with the tip of my brush, I'm going to turn my paintbrush the opposite way, and I'm going to press my brush down and lift it up. So press it down, lift it up, press it down, lift it up. And I'm just making these little strokes here and there of leaves. Just a few, and some can be down here. Okay? Just a few here and there, just to give it some green. So it's like a pushing feel. You might want to practice this for a minute. You can put some right over the flowers. When the green and the reds mix, it's really pretty. So it's kind of, it's just a push and a pulling off really quickly. I'll do the same over here on this branch. So push and lift off. Maybe one more right here. There. So look, and if you see if there's a spot where you think you need another one, you can add it. So now he has some greenery around him. I'm going to take a little bit more of the Viridian straight on my brush, and every now and then at the bottom of the leaves, I'll just put a little touch here and there, maybe just a couple, just to give it a little more variation. And it'll just sort of blend in to the other green. Just here and there. There. Okay. So there's one last thing I want to do. And I want to enhance his face just a little bit. So again, I'm going to take the cobalt blue. I'm going to turn my palette where I already had some blue and put that down on the palette. Get it nice and saturated into my brush, and then dab my brush off, okay, because I don't want extra paint, so I'm just kind of wiping it off. And I'm going to go into his face. And right around his eye back here, I'm going to put some little lines. This is just an extra step if you want to do it. So I'm leaving some white around his eye. And I'm just putting in some little feathery strokes to darken his head a little bit. See how I'm using the tip of my brush to pull some of that blue. And I want to leave a little bit of white around his eye because I like it. I just felt like his face feathers were not quite dark enough. But again, I'm just using little feathery strokes. Okay, Then I'm going to add a little bit more dark under his tail with the same blue, especially down that center line there. And I can rinse my brush and dry it off and just sort of soften that into the lighter blue. Little feathery strokes give it texture. And now I'm finished. Although, I lied. I'm going to pick up some more of the darker gray and just enhance his little leg and foot here because they got a little bit light. Okay. There. We have a sweet little bluebird on a flowering branch. This is a really simple project to do. I think it'd be super fun to send someone for Easter or spring, any other spring holiday, maybe Mother's Day. Just wrap it up in a pretty piece of handmade wrapping paper with a sweet message on the back and send it in the mail. Very sweet. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope that you're seeing some signs of spring where you are. Here it is very snowy and cold, but I was very delighted to see some red-winged blackbirds and some bluebirds when I was on a walk the other day. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you will subscribe to this channel, and as always, please ask me any questions. I am here to help. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. So I know that if you watch my videos regularly, you've heard me say that it's always good to try things 3 times. And these are the 3 times that I tried this project in order. And you can see that the last one, well, I'm happiest with the last one because I did it 3 times, and each time I got a little bit better at the techniques I was doing, and I felt a little more comfortable and free. So I hope you'll try it 3 times, and feel free to share any of them with me. I'd love to see. Thanks so much.